Last time, the Ming attacked the Japanese forces at Pyongyang and were defeated. The Wanli Emperor of China sent an edict out that the Ming would send over 100,000 soldiers into Korea to destroy the invaders. He also called on other nations to band together to fight the Japanese. I'm Stefan, and this is Japan at War. King Sanjo and his court, after receiving the news that the Ming had now fully committed themselves to destroying the Japanese, were, well, ecstatic. However, what was happening in the south of Korea would have much more immediate impact. After the defeat of the Japanese naval forces in August by Yi Sun-sin, naval commanders Wakizaka Yasuharu, Kuki Yoshitaka, Kato Yoshiaki, and Todo Takatora retreated to Busan. Hideyoshi sent out an order to stop all the naval attacks on the Koreans. It was wasting men and supplies. The Yellow Sea route was just too costly. Instead, the focus needed to be on strengthening their positions at Busan and on Koche Island, and continue the movement of supplies and men from Nagoya. At Yusu, Yi Sun-sin spent the next month after the Hansando and Angulpo campaign training his men to be even more effective and strengthening the fleet overall. You see, many of the ships at the start of the war had been put into production. Now, with 4 months having already passed, they were actually starting to be completed. The Korean Navy at this time was now 166, from what I've seen, which is a lot, honestly. With more ships at his command and a slew of victories under his belt, Yi Sun-sin began to seriously consider something that back in June he considered to be nothing more than a dangerous dream: a direct attack on Busan. The operation began in September 29th. Yi Sun-sin led his ships east to combine their strengths with Yeoki's ships. The next day, Won Kyun's small force combined with the others, and then they sailed in the direction of Busan. They reached the mouth of the Nakdong River on October 4th. A scouting ship sailed right next to Yi Sun-sin's flagship and told him the 500 enemy vessels were anchored in Busan harbor. Now, I don't know if this number concerned them, but I have a hard time imagining that it didn't. Either way, on the 5th, the combined Korean fleet fought a rather strong eastern-bound wind between the mouth of the Nakdong River and Busan, and it made sailing through the waters difficult as they had to now rely entirely on their oarmen. In the waters off Busan, Yi Sun-sin's force encountered a small force of around 24 ships that quickly turned around to retreat. Yi didn't want to let them escape, so he had his ships follow them into the bay, where the rest of the Japanese ships were anchored already in defensive formation, as per Hideyoshi's orders. The Korean forces arrayed their ships in a long, flexible line, much like a snake, and made a pass at the Japanese ships, firing the cannons as they passed. But there was several things that Yi Sun-sin hadn't factored in. One, that most of the Japanese ships were either lightly manned and some not at all. 2, his oarmen were extremely tired after fighting the winds at the Nakdong. And 3, and this is probably the most important, the Japanese had seriously beefed up the defensive capabilities of the fortifications from the cliffs above the bay. So, as the Koreans made their pass at the Japanese ships, the Japanese in these fortifications were raining down a combination of matchlock fire, arrows, and captured Korean cannons to fire metal and stone cannonballs that were said to be the size of a rice bowl. This combined onslaught of incoming fire made it difficult for the cannon crew to focus on firing at the ships. And the Koreans were also now taking casualties. With daylight starting to fall, Yi Sun-sin made the decision to call off the attack and headed into open waters, where he was confident the Japanese wouldn't follow. And even if they did, he felt that they would have the advantage. When the battle was done, he had crippled several Japanese vessels, but only managed to decisively sink 4. And he severely damaged another 100+ ships. On top of that, several of his men were injured, and some were even killed in the assault. One of Yi Sun-sin's commanders, Chung-un, also died in the battle. Now, considering his goal was to destroy the Japanese fleet at this battle, and, well, he didn't, this could actually be considered a loss for the esteemed naval commander. In a dispatch that Yi Sun-sin sent to the Korean government, he states that he had thought about attacking again the next day with a new strategy, then changed it when he realized that to do so would mean that the Japanese, after their ships had been destroyed, would be trapped in Korea, where they would probably retaliate against the Korean people. He writes, "So I have changed my plans to repair my ships and resupply them with cannon shot before returning to destroy these invaders when they are driven back to sea by a major counterattack on land. And with this in mind, I have disbanded the combined fleet and will return to my port on the 2nd of the 9th moon." That would be October the 6th. Now, some of you watching who are already familiar with this war may be thinking, wait, that's not how it went. Yi Sun-sin sunk hundreds of ships that day. He didn't lose. And this is the problem. This information comes from outdated research, mostly from Western sources. In fact, the part where I said only 4 Japanese ships were decisively sunk actually comes from a report from Yi Sun-sin himself. I'm not sure where the hundreds upon hundreds of ships loss actually comes from. This information comes from the Great Ming Military blog spot. I would encourage you to check them out, and if you can, show your support by donating on the page. Of course, this is where I will leave you. The truth, often different than popular belief. But this channel isn't interested in popular beliefs. And I'm not interested in popular beliefs, only facts. And will continue to put out real history. Now, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing down below. See you next time.